So we're going to quickly transition over to the NBA. We're pretty much about 10 games into the season for most teams, 10, 9-ish, depending on how many games each team has played so far. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the standings. It was kind of surprising, what's not too surprising. Once again, the Nuggets, they're up at number one in the West, so nothing crazy there. And we're also going to briefly talk about the in-season tournament with some games going on tonight. So let's just start with the West. As I mentioned, the Nuggets, once again, they're at number one, 8-2, in this short part of the season so far. I don't think that's really surprising at all. We did talk about it in the opening games video. That Nuggets Lakers game, it was a good one, but Nuggets, once again, they pretty much proved that they are defending champs for a reason. And I don't really see them faltering this season unless, of course, you got some injury issues, something like that. Jamal Murray right now, possibly having some issues with injuries, of course, but I don't see that being something that'll linger on too long into the rest of the season. And again, I think Nuggets should be fine as we get through the season.
Yeah, I think that they've been pretty dominant throughout the season. Maybe the surprising thing could be that they've been as dominant without Jamal Murray, but this is a pretty complete team all around. I don't think losing Jamal Murray takes away that much from them. Not to say that he's not important, but like their success isn't going to flatline because he's out. They're going to struggle a little more. They'll be a little less offensively, polished, but they're still going to be pretty good. It's a pretty complete team. I think we're beyond the narrative that it's Nikola Jokic and a bunch of goons. It's a good team. Behind them, though, and I can't even really say behind them. I guess they're second, but they are also 8-2. Except I think they might have lost a game to the Nuggets. Are the Dallas Mavericks? Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving have had a pretty solid start to the season, getting their squad up to the second place position. I would probably not have expected them to be the second seed, but we know this is a talented roster. We know that this team, can make a decent wave offensively for sure. Got some defensive, woes. They're not the most efficient team defensively, but they are 8-2, and they've been able to outscore their way up into a high position. We'll talk about that a little more when we get to the East and talk about how the Pacers have gotten up there because they're pretty high and it's all offense. The Mavericks don't have a terrible defense. Luka has come back this offseason. He looks more athletic. He's got a mustache. He's ready to cook the league.
Yeah, they're getting spanked by the doggone Pelicans right now. I'm not gonna lie, as this is going on. But yeah, Mavericks. That was the whole thing. Last year was obviously disappointing. You missed the playoffs after you trade for Kyrie. We talked about it whenever it happened. Oh, maybe they'll get things turned around. Kept saying it. Defense is only an issue, but they'll get things turned around. We kept saying it over and over, and then it just never happened. They didn't make the playoffs. But I think this year, again, it's only 10 games in, but definitely improved. And it's hard to say how things will turn out, late in the season. But with these guys playing at their absolute best, there aren't many duos in the NBA better than them. So yeah, I can definitely, if they continue to play at this level they're playing at right now, obviously not in the Pelicans game, but just in general, definitely can see them back up there at the top later in the season. Just depends on if these guys can stay healthy. There's no issues off the court or anything like that. But yeah, definitely much improved from last year. We're looking at the rest of the West right now. Kind of interesting. So Timberwolves, they're actually up there at 3. Then you got the Rockets, who that's probably the biggest surprise there. Ime Udoka has, that whole situation with the Celtics, obviously not amazing the way that ended, just to say the least. But he's over there in Houston, and seems to find his stride there early on. Obviously a very young team over there still, much like the Thunder, who are right behind them at 6-4. And then you got the California teams all behind them: Kings, Warriors, Lakers 6-8, and then the Clippers down at 11. That's probably the biggest story in the NBA right now. I'll let you take this one away, but James Harden, they talked about it this morning. Is it possible for James to come off the bench? We were talking about Russ coming off the bench before, but now it's possible. You might see James Harden coming off the bench instead, because things since he arrived, they've lost every single game.
Yeah, I'll get to the conclusion in just a second. I want to touch on something with the Timberwolves real quick. Something they have found their defensive glue. They have played really well, and Anthony Edwards has been on a tear. This is a team that I think actually could finish high in the West this year if they stay healthy, despite the way Cat has played. Interesting fun fact about the Timberwolves, though, is that they actually were the first loss for both the Nuggets and the Celtics. Celtics and Nuggets were having an undefeated start. Obviously, in the NBA, we don't expect anybody to go 82-0. But the Timberwolves brought them both their first loss. So they've had a pretty good season, which is something the Clippers cannot say. They're 3-6 right now, and yeah, James Harden off the bench. Uh, People our age, that's a crazy thing to think about. It makes me feel like we're really starting to get old. As I'm close to 23. Harden is, I grew up with Harden in his prime. Uh, Massive scorer. Even last year, in the past few years, he's been an amazing scorer. Not necessarily bad now. He scored well the other night, but he was also minus 28 when he was on the floor, which is atrocious. That's really, really bad. They didn't even lose the game by that much, I don't think. But being minus 28 on the floor is horrible. So maybe, at least to let the team keep the gel it had and let Harden kind of more naturally get into the system. I actually don't think it's a horrible idea to bring Harden off the bench for a little bit. If he ends up being a starter again, that'd be great. But I don't think he needs to kind of come in and take over the team yet. I know Emperor Palpatine, I am the system when he got over there. But the system has not worked. They've actually lost every game since and have fallen to 3-6. Had a promising start ish, and just haven't been able to get much going. It doesn't help that since he's been there, Paul George also had some pretty rough games here and there. But yeah, I don't think him coming off the bench is as crazy as it sounds initially. It's a weird thing to think about for the age group that I'm in and the Harden I've grown up watching, especially when you consider I've also grown up watching LeBron my whole life. I've been in the NBA since I was born almost, and he's still in his prime. It feels like obviously not quite in his prime, but still playing really really good basketball. So it's interesting to see players like James Harden and Russell Westbrook be kind of put in that off the bench conversation. But no, I would say that I think that even if it's temporarily, him coming off the bench could be very helpful for this Clippers team to kind of let them get their glue back together and find their groove again.
Yeah, so we're gonna move to the East real quick. Checking out the Eastern Conference standings, you got the 76ers. They're at the top. Obviously, Tyrese Maxey's been the one blowing up all over the place. Joel Embiid, of course. I think, you know, I don't want to blame James Harden because that seems like the easy thing to do right now, but it is just kind of funny how James Harden gets traded to the Clippers. 76ers are the best team really in the league right now because
Yeah.
the Nuggets and the Mavs as well as the Celtics all have the same amount of wins, but one more loss. So Sixers with the best record in the league right now, whereas James Harden has helped the Clippers fall to 3-6, as you just mentioned. So not entirely his fault, but it's just kind of funny how that turns out. And then the Celtics again, right behind him at 2. Not super surprising there. We did talk about him again after the opening game, where we had Chris Porzingis out here making step back threes. That new group, with Drew Holiday, Chris um, and of course Jalen and Jason, still going pretty strong early in the season. Nothing really crazy there. Um, and then got the Pacers at 3, and then the Bucks finishing out that top 4, lining up at number 4 there. I think again, it's still so early in the season to really talk too much about a lot of these duos, but of course, I think the Dame and Giannis duo has shown promise. I think just overall the Bucks they still got to gel a little bit more and be better defensively, of course. But that's again we talked about this last week. you lose Drew Holiday, even though you still have guys on defense that can play defense pretty at a high level. Um, Losing a guy like Drew Holiday is still going to affect you.
Yeah, I mean that Drew Holiday loss is stinging for sure in some of these games. They've had a few games where Dame was out or Giannis was questionable and then came in a little weird. But even then, we 3 games in a row until our most recent game, we blew a Giannis 50-point game. That was a loss. 2 Giannis 30-point games in a row, also losses. Kind of vintage like 2019 Bucks, where you get like 30 to 50 in that range out of Giannis, about 20 out of Chris Middleton, and the rest of the team is just kind of running around, including Dame and some of the games where he's been in. Had some bad efficiency. And I think that's just going to, the duo's got to find a little more glue, get together. Very complimentary style of basketball, but that lack of defense can definitely be rough. I think every game so far we've had, in some of the games were big wins. We were at one point doing pretty well when a player scored like 30 or 40 against us. So we for like 4 games in a row had some guard go crazy. They're just going at Dame. So Bucks, I don't think it's panic mode. The Pacers are demonstrating probably some of the best offense in the NBA. Have actually beaten the Bucks in a show of offense. Both of them high scoring game. Pacers come out on top at the end. Their defense again, also not that great. But it doesn't necessarily have to be if they can put up a lot of points. Now I will say they did put up a lot of points against the Celtics, but they also allowed the Celtics to score like 150 points, which is really, really bad. So Pacers have got some really, really big strengths. They rank really high in a lot of offensive categories for the whole NBA. Defense is going to be a little bit of a problem. And then maybe not so surprisingly for the rest of these, there's a lot of kind of mid teams here. I got the Magic and Hawks and Magic both at 5-4. The Nets, Knicks, and Raptors all 5-5, having some interesting seasons. Raptors had a hot start with Dennis Schroeder as the leader of that team. Hasn't gone as well in some of the most recent games, except they had an incredible win against the Wizards last night. But they're getting somewhere. And then from there, the Cavs not having the best start, 4-6, and the Bulls, Hornets, Wizards, and Pistons kind of about where they were at this point during last season.
Yeah, so again, we said this enough throughout the video. Still 10 games, barely for most of these teams into the season. A whole lot's going to change. I will say though, this in-season tournament, as we'll transition to that real quick. I did, I like the idea. I get it. You try to, I don't want to say revolutionize, but revitalize the regular season a little bit. My only thing is just the scheduling. I'm sure they'll start to figure things out a little bit more. But we were talking about this during the video, or before the video, I should say. There are a couple teams that have played 2 games in the tournament already, and there are still some teams that haven't played their first game, completed, of course. I don't understand that. I get, they didn't just take the divisions and just pretty much make the same things as for the groups. So, but even some of the groups, so like Group B, you have like Charlotte, the Heat, the Knicks, Wizards. You got Southeast over there, not including the Knicks, but you got the Southeast kind of over there. Then you got the Bucks. So I feel like they did want to kind of change things up a little bit there, but then I think that probably limited them as far as scheduling. And I guess they didn't want to, front load or back load like all the out of conference games in one space either. So I think they just need to kind of figure out the scheduling a little bit more. I don't think the rules are that confusing and everything. It's just the scheduling. Because when we were going to originally talk about this, there were literally like no games. There were a couple games, like 7 games 2 Fridays ago, and then games last Friday, and now games tonight. So that's just a little bit weird the way they have it scheduled, and I'm sure a lot of it's due to travel and everything, maybe TV deals and all that kind of crap. But right now, if you look at it, you got most teams, 1-0 right now. You got a couple teams, or just one team, a few teams, excuse me, at 0-2, and again, some teams are 0-0, haven't played a single game. So I just don't really. It's just a little hard to like follow in that regard. You just kind of got to remember when you look at the schedule, like, okay, this one's actually a part of the tournament, this one's not. But I do think that they'll start to flesh it out a little bit more once they get further into it, as far as planning each schedule each season. And I think they'll probably up the prize and probably up the stakes a little bit more, and maybe fix when it is, because I didn't even realize it was so early into the season in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really good idea. Um, I'm a big soccer fan, so the point differential thing is a fun way to do a group stage style of thing. I think the rules are pretty easy to understand. The scheduling has been really weird. Having like 5 teams or 3 teams that haven't played a game and 5 teams that have played two is a little weird. At least to their completion. Um, I think the groups are fine. I like the idea of it a lot. I do also wish that it wasn't like right now. It's kind of odd that it's like done by December. Then we'll start the new year. We'll have an All-Star break. We'll move on playoff time. You probably don't want it after the All-Star break. I guess I don't know. I think it could work there, but that's like a playoff thing right before the playoffs. So I get it. The NBA season's long though. There's plenty of places to put this aside from like it starting the second week of the NBA season. I do like that they count for regular season wins, so that you don't get a like not a super convoluted thing. Um, I like the idea of it. I think the groups are fun. There's some interesting matchups that'll happen throughout them. Right now, I don't think there's many surprises. Essentially, the people who are higher up in the NBA standings are higher up in the groups, except East Group B is actually being led by the Charlotte Hornets, who have the most points for and then tied for the Heat, or tied with the Heat for the biggest point differential. Them and the Bucks. The Hornets, Heat, and Bucks are all 1-0 in that division, but the Hornets leading that division is a funny thing about considering their actual NBA standings. Otherwise, the teams who have lower records are kind of at the bottom. The Spurs lower in their group, Clippers lower in their group, Grizzlies 0-2 at the bottom of their group. Thunder actually not a horrible record, 0-2 in the tournament though. So I think everything kind of works out. It's fun. It's maybe not as surprising, and maybe it'll be a little more fun when we get to the wild card round and we get to see the playoff kind of style of basketball where teams ramp it up a little more. But yeah, I like it. I hope that they start to polish it and make it a little more easy to follow and make the scheduling a little more clear. But this is something that I hope ends up being fun. People hated the play-in tournament. Some people still do, but I think that ended up working out, giving some fun implications in the season. And sure, this tournament just gives rich sports players more money, but it wasn't going to go to me anyway. So I think it's fun. The stakes are low, and it's kind of entertaining to watch. So